First and foremost, thank you for sticking around. People thinking, like, what on earth does hip hop got to do with gardening? We'll go into that a bit later. Thank you, Ruby and Christabel, again for having us consistently and highlighting the work, because it's very transformative. But as you'll hear, it's quite a challenging environment we work in. I've also brought my amazing, friend, but also one of the original founders of Hip Hop Garden, which is a program we're specifically going to talk about, which is our youth program. So Zaira Rasool was one of the original directors of May Project Gardens, and then supported myself in forming Hip Hop Garden, which is the program that now we're going to specifically talk about, and is still involved in Hip Hop Garden. So I suppose first and foremost has anyone heard of May Project Gardens or Hip Hop Gardens? And those people that leave and I see you. I see you. I'm gonna bait you out. I don't care. Some people familiar with the project. So we've been running for about 17 years now in a council house, as Ruby mentioned, and just basically reconnecting people to nature for personal, social, economic transformation, and it's been incredible. Like, it's just been absolutely incredible. I think very often, as we were talking about the speakers before, there's a lot of focus on high-end solutions, and that's not what we reside. We're very grassroots. We sit in communities with a lot of poverty, a lot of challenges, like when music's playing, when I'm talking, all that kind of stuff on a regular basis. It's like there's always a constant challenge. And that just means that the work we do and the approach we do is slightly different, and it's always centered around people, but particularly those people that don't really, voices are not heard or not seen, etc., etc., etc. So that's the context. I'm going to pass you on to Zaira Rasool. Zaira, is that Zaira? Which one is it?
Yeah, I'm Zaira. Ian got the correct pronunciation. I've been involved with May Project for many, many years. I met Ian when the project was just like a volunteer-run community garden, and then we worked for many years to grow it into what it is today. I then kind of moved on and took the principles that I learned from May Project and set up something in the Gambia, which is kind of giving people access to technology. But when I say it's rooted in May Project principles, I really mean that, because one of the key things I learned when I was working closely with Ian was about how to make things truly community driven and truly grassroots. And it's not an easy thing. I think a lot of people say community a lot, but what does that actually mean? How do you actually engage people, and then how do you make them really part of the journey and part of the thing? And I'm proud to say I feel like I've taken those lessons and
Oh yeah, I saw your cabbages last season, and I was envious. So we use food as one of the main engagement tools, and Zaira kind of was spending a lot of time in the garden, and I kind of took a little pause for various reasons. And then she's Instagramming me and WhatsApping me all her stuff in her garden. I was like, what? How did you like it? It's so impressive. So, yeah.
That was just one of my personal pursuits. But anyway, and then with Hip Hop Garden, one of the key things that Ian and I worked on together was developing Hip Hop Garden, which is an education model combining nature and music to educate young people around sustainability, around food growing. But the key thing is, the key driving force is that you're using kind of creative methods to engage young people in these matters that we're talking about, but also bringing into it an understanding of how they can benefit their own personal transformation, whether that is their well-being or economic. And what I mean by that is, what can I do with this skill? What can I do with this knowledge? The reality, especially in a city, London, is you need money to live. I know that's a reality everywhere, but really is a reality in a city, London. That was a key element of it as well, enterprise, but enterprise in a sustainable way. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. So basically, Hip Hop Garden has 5 key modules or 5 elements. So similar to Nature, 5 elements in Hip Hop Garden. So who's familiar with hip hop first and foremost? Is everyone okay? So just call out what's the elements of hip hop? What are the elements? MC. What else? Just shout out. Go. B. Beat. Yeah. DJing. What else? Breaking, yep. What else? Graffiti, yep. Okay. So it's quite a unique culture. And this year, does anyone know what year it is? Okay, there's some hip hoppers in here. Okay, all right, you know your stuff. So it's the 50th anniversary. And what's amazing about hip hop is the ability to transform. So that's why we use it as a creative tool for young people. We have to imagine that basically hip hop started in the ghettos. When we talk about urbanization, for the first time in the globe, we are living in a world where more people are living in urban environments than they are living in rural environments. So our perspective and how we're going to grow food or engage people has to come from that perspective. And that's why we use hip hop. So hip hop grew out of the concrete jungles and the margins of society. And it's interesting because as well as doing the garden works. So basically, like, we use the garden for we use the garden's designed using permaculture. Is anyone familiar with permaculture? Okay. So anyone want to give us a quick definition of permaculture? What's permaculture?
It's like working in symbiosis with nature.
Okay, fantastic. What else?
The art of building beneficial relationships.
All right. So you bring those two models together, hip hop and garden, using permaculture. And what the permaculture does for us, there's this concept. Is anyone familiar with valuing the edges and the marginal? Has anyone heard of that? It's a principle you see in nature. Whenever you see ecosystems on the edge, or when two ecosystems meet, that's when the most innovation happens. So if you apply that same principle to people on the edge of society, that's where the most innovation happens. And we can testify to that through our program called Hip Hop Garden as well. So the 5 modules, the 5 elements are, as Zaira said, well-being. We always start with the well-being of our young people before we even get into actually the delivery of the program. Where are they at? Are they functioning well? We've got some sad stories to tell, unfortunately, today. But we've also got some positive news. So well-being is really important. And as Zaira said, the entrepreneurship is crucial. If you look at the disparity between rich and poor, and it's interesting that it's increasing despite the awareness of climate change and environmental issues, the disparity is becoming greater. So although we're very lucky here to be in medicine and we're surrounded by lots of people that, fully engage with this conversation, you talk to some people that we work with, particularly young people, they're like, they don't even know what climate change is and how it's relevant to them as well. So it's really important from that perspective. And then we have hip-hop, as I mentioned, as a tool for PR, for evaluative tools, but also for promotion as well. Then we have, let's forget this one. We have an event called Can We Grow? So we bring them together to basically create an event. And the last cohort of young people that we worked with in Bristol put on an event, specifically in Bristol, and they managed to attract 150 people from the black and brown sector, environmental sector. The reason why they did that is because the environmental sector is the second or the least diverse next to farming. So they wanted to address that issue, and they did a very good job as well. And then the third, the food, of course. Food is fundamental as well. So we always have an element of food, whether it's cooking or growing. So that's the kind of 5 elements as well. Yeah? Should we talk a little bit about maybe some of the actual programs? Actually, any questions before we move forward? Because we don't want to get into a teacher session. Any questions? Come on, feedback, comments.
So the 5 elements of what?
Well-being, employability and entrepreneurship, food, hip-hop, and event management, or Can We Grow? So those are the 5 elements as well. And they work across, within that, there's different, as Zaira spent hellish weeks with me, my dyslexic brain trying to figure out what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to do. Zaira helped me basically formulate it so it could be understood in the more formal settings. Question at the back and then we'll go.
How do people come to you, or do you kind of go out and find people? Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so it's taken different forms over the years. So when it was first developed, we developed a whole curriculum. So it's a curriculum, and one of the first places that we ran it was in a youth club in South London, in an area called Loughborough Junction, which is right next to Brixton, but it's behind Brixton. We ran it there for 3 years, and it was a journey. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So that was one kind of way of doing it. We also went into an estate and did it there, also in South London, which was more, that was more like young boys. This was all ages. And that's when we started learning that this can be applied not just for the youth, but, for older people like to write hip hop too. But what's been great is since those early days, it turned into a real specific program that we thought could really work well with young refugees. And at that point, we started inviting those young people to the May Project Gardens site. And I think that was the most beautiful place for it to happen, because that's the heart of the project. And it was a beautiful group of young people to run that project with.
Yeah, so probably the most challenging group of young people that we work with when we talk about well-being. These young people have been completely displaced from their families, their communities. They've lost everything. And they come, we wanted to play a track, so if we haven't got the band to play a track, but if you go to our website or go to the Bandcamp, you can hear a song called Freedom Now. And they're talking about their journey coming to the UK. That's when we use the hip hop. So for them, it wasn't specifically about the food per se. It was about the ability to use a safe space and a green space and the garden to make them feel comfortable to talk about their traumas and their pain. And they did it through the track called Freedom Now. And it's just a really beautiful thing to use music in that way, in a way that basically actually allows them to basically like a therapy. So that was that. And then off the back of that, we're very aware of the disparity economically. So I don't know if refugees get, I think if anyone knows, I think they get like £30 a week to live on. That's, what was it? It's about right? £5 a day. You try living on £5 a day. In London, can you imagine it? They've just come from a place they've lost everything and they're given £5 a day. The UK is probably the least, has the least uptake of refugees in the whole of Europe. And they're treated really badly. So that was a conversation that we were having over and over again, and they were talking about the challenges they have in their housing. And so I was saying, well, you know what? If you know about permaculture, problem is a solution. That's kind of how we are. We're always solution focused. We talk a lot about the problems, but we don't dwell in them. We talk about the problems to identify them, but to make solutions. So we were like, okay, let's build a structure. Let's build something that you could get skills from, that you could take to your own environment. And they're like, shut up, you crazy guy, crazy guy. I'm like, no, we can build something. So in the end, they built a straw bale classroom for themselves, and they got paid, and they also got qualifications. That's what we're about. We're about providing solutions. But unfortunately, we had a split with another director. So we took some time out. We've just been kind of restructuring. And but Zaira's still engaged with some, I don't know if you want to, is that appropriate?
Which bit?
The young refugee in particular.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So basically, we just started actually re-engaging with the young refugees as well. So we've gone back to the main youth club where they're at. And we're literally starting again. We always kind of grab them through the creative arts, if that makes sense. We always go into with a creative element because we don't want to tell them about the doom and gloom of climate change and, it's just depressing.
So I want to give you like a few examples, a few stories. So for example, when we were running it in the youth club I was telling you about in South London, our kind of like pilot program, which we ran then for 3 years. One of the things was so most of these young people and the young people, the age group that we were working with was like maybe like 10, 9, 10 up until 15.
So this is we talk about refugee group. This is the other group. This is Marcus Lipton. We're going back to.
So these are like South London inner city boys. So that's who we're talking about now. One of the things we started doing is introduce so we've got these 5 elements of the hip hop garden, but we'll use different ones based on the group and what we think fits. So with that one, we used food as like the in. We started introducing plant-based food to these young people.
to great response, right?
So they weren't really very happy about it because they were used to getting Nando's every Friday. And then we changed all of that. But then by the end of it, not only were they cooking the plant-based food, and preparing it and everything for themselves and the whole of the youth club, but some of them were giving up chicken.
Yep.
They actually...
We did it. We got them to give up chicken.
Yeah. People were, and then we started taking them out into the community and running community cafes and cooking the community plant-based cuisine. And then they start seeing that, oh, people will pay money for this cuisine. And then you start showing them pathways and alternatives to the things that they might normally go by, and start seeing that actually, oh, there's more to this world. So that's just like one example. Obviously, we also did food growing with them. We created a track with them and did a music video, which was great. I wish we could play it for you, but it's all on the website. So that's just like a little bit of a flavor of like how it works and how it grows. And what's important to understand is, what we're trying to do is something that's not it's hard. So you've got to be a bit flexible about how exactly you do it and based on the group that you're working with. Maybe you can talk a little bit about like the refugee group and what shape that took.
Yeah. So again, talking about the garden, again, we use this notion of the garden permaculture, observe and interact. So when we go into a community space with the young people, it was actually Zaira who had, with Marcus Lipton, had much more engagement with the young people because she was a female. She's very bubbly and energetic. They were like, she's really cool. Whereas me, they thought I was a policeman. They just thought I was the feds. They were like, every week, yeah, it's feds. Like, feds are police, basically. So they thought I was a policeman coming into there. It's their way of creating a defense so they don't engage with me. Do you know what I mean? But I remember the moment that it switched. And it was a time when they were talking about my trainers. And obviously they have the latest trainers, the most fashionable trainers. They were probably worth more than everything that I've gotten at the moment. And they were like, oh, we like your trainers. Obviously joking, do you know what I mean? Because they weren't the latest trainers. But I was like, do you want a pair? And that broke the ice. And then from then on, I managed to kind of engage it. So you've got to look for those. They said it's really hard to find those ins to kind of engage with them. And the food was magical. I'm liking hearing Zaira talk about this stuff because I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is really amazing journey as well. The video's on there as well, so you can see it. So we did that. But with the refugees specifically, we had to do a bit more outreach. And we went to a place called Darrow Youth Club, where a lot of them is called Injera Club. Again, food, that theme. So basically, a lot of the young people do not have spaces where they can kind of actually just be themselves and be comfortable and just have their community. So Darrow basically have food every week. They create food for them. They have activities as well. And so what we did was we did music for them. And actually, off the back of the music, they were like, okay, this sounds really interesting. They were kind of like really interested in the music. By the way, we do it at a garden. And they were like, oh, music in a garden. This sounds interesting. And it was actually Amir, one of the most, it's on camera, one of the most interesting young people. Do you know what I mean? but yet probably the most talented young person that we've met. Like, his talent is incredible. But he'd been through a lot of stuff. He's been through a lot of stuff, seen a lot of horrific stuff. Won't mention it because camera's filming, so I won't mention the stuff, do you know what I mean? But it's horrible. And so that impacted him in a lot of the ways. And that's why I'm being mindful about talking about him in the cameras on, because I want to be respectful as well. But he literally was like, you lot, we're going to do sessions at the garden, come down. And he started the process of getting these young people. And at one point, we had about 20 young people coming on a regular basis to the garden. And the culmination was the Straw Bale classroom, as I said as well. So that was that. What time is it? Time check. 3:40, yeah? Do you want to add some?
Yeah, I just thought it was a good moment to talk about Rebel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the key missions of the organization and the work is, we're working with young people who've been through a lot. And when we're working with the young refugees, like, it's really, really complex stuff that we're working with. So, the focus is creativity. You're kind of inspiring them with different ways that they can kind of make pathways for their life. But, before anyone can even think about getting a job, they have to kind of deal with whatever's going on within them. And if you've gone through the sort of things that some of these young people have gone through, it can be hard to take that step before you've resolved some of the emotional stuff. So the emotional stuff is also really important. I know that, we were doing kinds of like retreats and things like that as well through the process, to hold space for that and to kind of create bonding. So, Ian gave an example of Amir, another young man, Rebel. He was one of the leading people in terms of the garden. He was just great at the garden. And actually it's because he grew up around it. Back in Eritrea, his mum was working on the farm, so he knew from a young age about agriculture, but then obviously he wasn't really doing it. And then when we started working with him, he just picked it up and got really, really into it.
He used to say he used to dream of the garden. Remember, he used to go away, he used to dream of coming back to the garden. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. And then after I kind of left working with May Project, he actually started coming to my garden. I had a garden for a bit, and he actually helped me create that garden. He would be like, "Oh look," he'd be like, "Oh, your garden's looking good." I'm like, "It's not my garden, it's your garden," because he really created everything in that, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. But the reality is that there's only so much that you can do, and there's so much you can hold for some of these young people. And he also had to live his own life and be a young man. He's in his early 20s. So sadly, one of the things that can happen in London is someone a young person who has so much or can do so much needs a lot of support. And sadly with Rebel, and maybe the support network wasn't there enough for him. He went missing.
How long now? How long?
10 days ago. And yeah, it's really, really sad to see. And one of the challenges we have with the work that we do is that we try to build an environment of positivity and of aspiration, but we have to constantly balance it with the realities of the system that we're existing in. And I really say that word system with emphasis, because what I see in the circumstances around Rebel's situation is he's someone who had a lot of potential but got lost in a system that is not focused, it's not human-centric. So anyway, Yeah.
Yes, it you know, and it's interesting because we try and keep it as positive as possible, but the reality of working in a city, this is stuff that happens. So we talked about the refugees; these are not isolated incidences. So, for example, with Marcus Lipton, there was a fatality there. So the reason why we stopped working there, we went. One of the reasons why we started working with the refugees is because actually there was a fatality, and the youth club closed down, and that's where we work. And so it's very interesting that you see this massive growth in these organizations that are working with young people, particularly in the inner city, but yet we don't get the support and funding and support and the investment to do this work, and this stuff happens. And it's like you see the amazing possibility. Tupac called it the rose that grows out of concrete. Like we see it time and time again, but we struggle to do that balancing act of trying to procure funding and delivery. It's impossible. We shouldn't have to be struggling to do that. We should just be doing a delivery. That should be our focus. And then more recently, I don't think I told you, we just started working in St. Paul's in Bristol, another area of where there's challenges. And literally, I was there a week, and we had to move the centre because there was a fatality there. So, like the system, you talked about it, there is a systematic thing. When you see one thing happening, like maybe death or isolation or a loss, then you can say it's an isolated incident. But this has happened within our program 4 times. So there is a real issue here, whether it's related to their personal traumas, whether it's gang related or whether it's police, but whatever it is, it's a reoccurring thing. So as Zaira said, it's a very hard thing to kind of unpick and manage and resolve. But there is always positive stories, which we're going to tell you a bit more about as well.
Yeah, no, just to add to that, like, I mean, I don't have all the answers, but what I'm learning is that, yeah, you just got to stay positive. You got to stay positive and keep remembering that it's better that you did the work than not do the work. That's it. And you can't fight every battle. You can't change the whole system overnight, but you can do what you can do. And you got to keep doing what you can do.
And it's interesting because if you're around later on, it's funny, you haven't heard some of my new songs, but off the back of Hip Hop Garden, I've kind of always used creativity as in all aspects of the work we do, but not so much myself. So when Ruby was talking about KMT Freedom Teacher, that's my artist name. I will be performing in the Ubuntu stage at 6:30, and some of the songs are based on the circumstances that happened in these with these young people. One of them is actually specifically talking about, well, it's called Liar Liar. It's actually talking about the system and how the impact it has on these young people as well. So that is something if you're around later on at 6:30. But yeah, just want to open it up to people. We want to try and move away from the kind of teaching. Is there any questions that people have? Oh, beautiful. Love that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really enjoyed it. Sounds like magical, amazing work. So first of all, credit to you both, obviously. I'm just curious about the centres that you mentioned that had to shut down due to the fatalities. It's just an interesting thing. I'm not sure why you would have to shut a centre for that. You know, there's obviously more people there that are still using it. It's not the centre's fault. Why do they have to shut down?
Can I take? So coming back to the system that we exist in, when something happens like a fatality in a youth club, people investigations start happening, obviously, naturally, about what happened, who did what. During that time, it's very, very difficult to continue the work because you don't know what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. You don't know what's safe and what's not safe. If you're responsible for keeping a group of young people safe and you're being kind of investigated, for example, of how it's happened, then you can't with confidence do that. That's one of the key things. So there's immediately there's like fear that gets introduced. And the easiest thing is to say, young people, stay at home, please. Also, it's like if from the other side of it, if you as a group of youth workers or the manager are saying, no, we feel confident that we can keep these young people protected after something like that happened. You have to be really confident. Yeah? Because if anything happens again, yeah, it's you that did it. So that's that's the short answer.
And it's interesting because even before that fatality happened, it happened on Halloween. Do you remember that day? So literally, like, they were in an estate. So there is rival. There is this. I don't want to trivialize the issue, but there is rival gangs basically in that area. So the rival gang, when it was, and you could feel the energy. I remember that day. You could feel the energy in the club just feeling a little bit darker. It was Halloween, so it was kind of like they were kind of allowed to bring in masks, but you could just feel when we came in, it was just like, it was a bit edgy. And then basically, what happened? So there was fireworks being let off outside, which basically got the young people kind of to come out and like, what's going on? And then unfortunately, that someone got stabbed that night. So it is a dangerous environment that we're working in. Like, you know, it's not. As I said, I call it. It's not for the faint-hearted. But as we said, like, these young people ended up becoming, as I said, when you see it in the video, one person became a vegan off the back of our program. Another person basically was feeding. I remember that as such a beautiful thing when they fed the local community. Because I remember this conversation with an elder person chatting to the young person. They don't really, because they have a fear of each other. And I just remember just her saying, "Oh, this little boy, him cooking the food." And I was just like, oh my God, like, it was so beautiful to see like how she saw him in a different light, you know, like rather than being, it's that kind of thing where you perceive someone, so you don't talk to them and you keep hold of your perceptions and it just stays the same. If anyone's watched City of God, there's a perfect scene in there where the black guy from the favelas is looking at this white guy going, "Oh, you gringo," da 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 da, and he's looking at this guy from the favelas going, "Oh, look at this guy from the favelas," like, and they're thinking, and they chat and they get on and they become best friends. Not saying it always works like that. That's just a film. It's obviously a film. But the point being, unless you have the dialogue, you don't know where people are coming from. Different people, different experiences. So yeah, that's really important.
Yeah. So, did anyone have any other questions?
Great, beautiful.
But just any advice or sharings around
Just do it.
acquiring funding?
Do the work. Forget the funding, do the work. We wrestled with becoming formalized. So we've been going for 17 years. For 9 years, we had no funding. We just got on with it. Yeah, just doing the work. Because no one believed that we could engage young people in the way that we could and get the results that we could. We were like, now everyone's like, oh yeah, like, you know, music and growing and art and growing. Everyone's jumping on it. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's doing it. But when we did it, no one was doing it. No one was working with inner city young people. No one was taking inner city young people to do yoga. Like, no one was taking them to do gong. Like, you know, there's things that we see in the festival that are kind of pretty standardized. You know, no one was doing that stuff, but now they, you know, it's become more commonplace as a result of our work. We pioneered a lot of this work, but what happens is this kind of thing. So be mindful of. There's still this extractivism that exists in the system. That means when you're a grassroots organization like us and a black-led organization, we get extracted. People don't want to invest in us. They'd rather go, "Oh, this is really good. We'll take this. This is really good. We'll take that." And because they have more resources and more power, they then replicate models that we do.
My perspective on it is in terms of just, you're saying, the challenges for black people. Is like sometimes, as I said, like I was talking about the flexibility sometimes that you need to approach things with when you're dealing with complex issues. That flexibility sometimes means that it might not fit into every structured work plan, but that's what needs to happen for the work to happen. But it's not always going to be agreeable to the people who hold the money or hold the power. So, Yeah, that's what I would add to that.
So funding, definitely have, so specifically funding, we've been doing it a long time. I would say be broad in the way you approach funding. Don't become reliant on grants. Be entrepreneurial. Be entrepreneurial. Look within your local community for support for funding as well. Be quite broad in the way you do it. We've managed to, despite the challenges, we've managed to be okay. Not flushed, not rich by any means compared to big organizations, but we've managed to do, we're doing okay. And I think that's good enough for us, really. What's now happened is that we're now having much more conversations with specific individual funders about, as Zaira said, them working to our needs as opposed to we're working to their needs. So, for example, I'm dyslexic. I can't really do applications. Zaira's been really helpful in doing applications, and previous director was really amazing at it as well. So they were really good at that stuff. I can't do it. So already I'm dependent on someone else to help me to get that funding money in. So that's why we call it an ecosystem, because you're dependent on other people to get stuff done. When you work in that way, you have a relationship which is much more like this as opposed to that. When you have resources, you have power, you can go and do stuff without any accountability. No one's making accountability until things go wrong. But that's not how we've always had to work in the community. We've always had to work with people. And that creates dependency, but it also creates strength as well. So it depends on what you're looking for, but I hope that helps with your funding. Definitely do the applications, go out there, do your crowdfunder, do what you need to do, but don't rely on it. And the most important thing, do the work. There's a thing that someone said from a group in the favelas in Brazil, and they said something like, we do the work with the money, but we don't do the work. We still do the work without the money. And I think that's crucial.
And a key thing about that is it builds quality. Because I just want to say, sometimes, like community grassroots things, they lack quality. But when your focus is the work, and doing it well and doing the thing that your mission, then the quality will come naturally, because that's your focus, is doing things properly. So, and then when the quality is there, then you are going to be attracting the right things towards you, because you can say, I've done this, we've done this, and you have evidence of it. So, yeah.
And the thing that you're going to have to do is quantify and evidence. That's the thing. That's the thing we always struggled with. Everyone wants to see how we're doing. Thank you, beautiful. Thank you. We're on track. Everyone wants to see outcomes. Everyone wants to see tracking outcomes, but that's not been our strength. Our strength is qualitative data, which is actually the stories. So if you go to the videos, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So why can't we get the money? Everyone's like, it's amazing. Why can't we get the money? It's the same thing. People want to see, oh, this person has moved from A to B to C, which is great. You need that. But we're dealing with people and human beings. And why do we always have to categorize them and quantify them in order to basically get money? So that's something we always have to. And again, if you see me perform, I've got a song called Hard Is. And one of the second verses is actually talking about that challenge that we have as well. So, yeah.
Any more questions?
So yeah, it sounds like you have many different components to the hip hop garden. So I was just wondering what a regular day would look like.
Yeah. Do you want to? I mean, maybe it's more helpful because I'm not so actively involved in the thing. I can say what my observations are. So, May Project Gardens. You've got the community garden, which is like the heart of the project. That has open days, like community gardens do, Fridays and Sundays. So that could look like any open day where people come, they tend to the garden, they learn some skills, that sort of thing. Sometimes have specialist workshops, but sometimes those workshops, it could be cob building, but it could be poetry. It could be using, I actually was a participant of one of these poetry workshops and I really enjoyed it. And it was, using the natural surroundings as an inspiration for that. So just helping people who normally don't spend time in nature connect to nature in different ways. So those are the open days. It could be going out to a youth club, a school even, doing workshops, you know, kind of the youth stuff that we were talking about. It could be engaging people who are more like, I guess, like work in companies and things like that, bring them to the space and get them to understand, you know, connect them to nature and all of that, but also give them a fresh perspective on their maybe central London life. Yeah, and then doing things like this, just trying to spread the word and informing people. That's what I observe.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. It is. I think this is why we call it. We're moving much more into this notion of ecosystems being mentioned a lot more, but actually working in that way, looking at the work from a perspective of the ecosystem as opposed to, you know, a department or a skill set, because actually it is a much more organic way. It started, as Zaira said, in the garden, and that is nature is the basis of how we work. Like, it's a very organic way of working. And it's very interesting because everyone, when we talk about nature, they always talk about, I heard someone talk about technology earlier, like nature's the best technology ever. That's how we got the internet. Like, it is the most sophisticated form of technology out there. Like, you know, you have this thing called, not biophilia, what's the thing? There's this technology, biomimicry, where people go out and basically replicate nature products. So, you know, the tape thing, like, you know, that you stick on, like, to stick stuff on your clothes and stuff, that's come from nature. That's an insect that they used it from. So that is biomimicry. So nature is the most advanced form of technology. So by using it, fully embedding nature into the design of all our programs, means that it has to work, and it does work. But we're still not at a stage where, you know, for example, my office is outside in the garden. That's where I work. It's a lifestyle. It's not just a segregated thing as well. So, yeah, I think that's time, unless there's any more questions from anyone. One last question for anybody? No? So if anyone's, great. If anyone's interested, we've got some cards with our details in there as well. And yeah, thank you once again for giving us a space to talk about Hip Hop Garden.
And yeah, one final request. I know it's a slightly sad note, but as I said, Rebel, this young man, is missing. If anyone is linked up to any social media pages or platforms that might be able to help, find him. I know it's basically it's like you don't know where he could be, so it could be anything. But if you think of anything, please let me know. I've got some posters here which has details of what you need to do or what information you might need. So yeah, thank you.